Here to break down all the latest on the legal front, distinguished professor at Touro University, Thane Rosenbaum, and founder of LegalInsurrection.com and professor of law and director of Securities Law Clinic, that's a lot, at Cornell Law School, William Jacobson. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for being with us today.
Morning.
All right, let's get right into it. A lot's been made of the classified documents. We've all seen the pictures of the boxes at Mar-a-Lago. So, Thane, did Donald Trump handle these documents in an improper way, and do his actions warrant this indictment?
So, Mike, as you know, this week the document case is split from the January 6th case. So we have that case. At this point, there was a hearing this week in connection with a trial date. The talk of now is about the indictment in connection with the January 6th case. But since you're asking me about the documents case, look, I've always maintained on Newsmax and elsewhere that, no one is talking about the Presidential Records Act, which means that if you're going to bring a case of espionage, remember, espionage is a really serious charge. It's saying you are an enemy of our state, and it's only in the past been used for the most part, people who've taken documents and shared them with foreign entities or sold them. And there's no allegation of that here. So then the question is, can you use the Espionage Act, the enemy of a state, against the President of the United States for merely possessing the documents, not showing it to anybody, not destroying? The mere possession alone, you put a former president in jail for that? Really? Well, let me just point out, there is a statute, the Presidential Records Act. And guess what that says? It says that if you're a former president, we recognize that you have a possessory interest in documents created during your presidency, but it really belongs to the public. So we will engage in a conversation, a negotiation with you to see what you can hold on to and what you can't, right? So again, really, major media, no one is talking about the Presidential Records Act. That means that there is a law that contemplates that former presidents could have possession of the documents. And guess what? That statute does not apply to Joe Biden because the documents in his house were taken when he was vice president senator and not president. And it doesn't apply to Hillary Clinton because she was Secretary of State. Gentlemen, so again, I just never saw either of these cases as being especially strong. The January 6th case, in my view, is even weaker than the documents case.
A lot of people saying the opposite on that. Some people don't really know both these cases, but people have different opinions on. But the Justice Department wanted the trial to start in December, and then the Trump team wanted it to start much later than that, and push it back past the 2024 election. Now, the federal judge settles on a May date. So, William, do you think that this is a fair outcome?
Well, I think, the judge has to balance the Speedy Trial Act and the fact that we don't just postpone things for convenience sake with the rights of the defendant, in this case, Donald Trump. I think May is probably a viable date if we didn't have a political calendar. And so the question is, does the judge take into account a presidential election cycle? I think postponing it till after the election would deprive the public of the knowledge of what the government's case is. Is it as weak as some people claim, or do they have a lot more evidence than is in the indictment? The indictment doesn't need to disclose and present your entire case. And I think the public, before it votes, I would have rather seen this go in December. I think before the public votes, it needs to know, is this a highly politicized complaint against him, or do they have a lot more information than we know about? It would be really terrible if we had this trial after somebody's elected or after voters have voted, and we find out it's a lot worse than we thought. On the other hand, if it is as weak as some people claim, let's find that out before we vote. So I think May is probably reasonably the soonest she could have done it. There's too much work that needs to be done. But, the politics of this is very strange because it's a presidential election.
It does. It's something that's really, it's just like uncharted water here.
Exactly. That's the real problem here. And the Justice Department is supposed to do its very best not to interfere with elections. So the judge has to balance that as well. That is the policy of the DOJ.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one. But on the other side of the aisle, we have the IRS whistleblowers as well, alleging that the investigations into the Biden's finances were stymied at every step. So, Thane, I'll come back to you on this. How credible do you think those allegations are?
They're very serious, Sarah. As we just said, Merrick Garland is the Attorney General who runs the Justice Department, but he works for Joe Biden, and he's in the Biden cabinet, right? So there is clearly a interest that he has in Joe Biden. If Joe Biden does not get reelected, he doesn't have to keep his job. So then the question is, what was going on with the Justice Department that at every turn stymied these investigators, who said that even the prosecutors ahead of them agreed that further investigation and the possibility of indictments were something that ordinarily would happen. But in this case, they were told to stand down. So the optics of it just looked terrible because they seemed very compelling and they seemed truthful. And what you're seeing is that at every turn, everything, including the new indictment in Washington, D.C., in connection with January 6th. The government has not held back on Donald Trump, but clearly when it came to the Bidens, they have not pursued any further investigation or indictments. The optics of that, obviously, is for anyone to determine for themselves, but doesn't look good.
It doesn't, but
not
yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
We got to leave it there. Thane Rosenbaum, William Jacobson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. All right.